The morning began with calm skies over the city, but inside the towering glass headquarters of Whitmore Global, chaos struck like thunder. News alerts exploded across screens, flashing accusations of fraud. Jonathan Whitmore said, "This is fabricated nonsense." Yet his hands trembled as his boardroom filled with whispers. Cameras outside flashed like lightning, and traders screamed into phones as billions evaporated. Sarah Mitchell said, "Jonathan, you must address this now." His breath caught as betrayal hung heavy in the air. Thomas Green said, "Investors are pulling out." The weight of every decision now bore down on Jonathan's chest, his empire shaking under him. Panic rippled through the staff, a frenzy of uncertainty. The air felt poisoned, thick with fear and suspicion. Nothing would ever be the same again. The chaos spread beyond the boardroom, flooding news feeds and social channels in seconds. Jonathan Whitmore's name became synonymous with scandal. Sarah Mitchell said, "Every second we wait, the world decides our fate." His silence was deafening, his empire bleeding value with every tick. Thomas Green muttered, "Shareholders are furious." The city itself seemed to lean into the storm, skyscrapers vibrating with rumor. Trust crumbled faster than numbers could fall. Jonathan's world was not just shaken, it was ripped wide open, exposing fault lines he had long ignored. By midday, cameras swarmed outside headquarters. Reporters shouted questions, their voices like daggers. Jonathan Whitmore stepped forward reluctant. He forced his words steady, "These allegations are baseless." Yet even as he spoke, doubt laced his tone. Sarah Mitchell said, "You must appear stronger." The crowd smelled weakness. Thomas Green lowered his gaze, unable to meet Jonathan's eyes. The empire that once inspired fear now invited ridicule, and Jonathan felt the walls of his glass fortress closing in. Inside the boardroom again, whispers turned to open defiance. Sarah Mitchell said, "If we don't act decisively, we'll lose control." Jonathan Whitmore clenched his fists. Thomas Green said, "Some directors are already siding with rivals." The air crackled with betrayal, heavy as storm clouds pressing against glass. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, realizing the battle wasn't just with the outside world but within his own ranks. The empire was splintering, and each ally could be an enemy in disguise. Night fell, but the storm only grew darker. In his office, Jonathan Whitmore stared at the city skyline, its lights flickering like fragile hope. Sarah Mitchell said, "You cannot fight shadows with silence." Thomas Green said, "They're closing in, Jonathan." The CEO whispered to himself, "I built this empire brick by brick." Yet for the first time, the weight of those bricks pressed on him like a tomb. Outside, the city roared with voices demanding blood, and Jonathan knew the night marked only the beginning of his downfall. The stock ticker burned red through the morning, each digit a wound slicing deeper into Whitmore Global's empire. Jonathan Whitmore gripped the polished edge of his desk, his eyes fixed on numbers that refused to stop falling. Sarah Mitchell said, "Rivals are already circling like vultures." Her voice carried the sharpness of urgency, echoing in the sterile silence of the office. Thomas Green muttered, "The market doesn't believe us anymore." His shoulders slumped, resignation heavy in every word. The screen seemed alive, mocking Jonathan with brutal certainty. Outside, the city's rhythm matched the chaos, every honk and shout feeding the collapse. Jonathan whispered to himself, "They won't bury me this easily." Yet even as he spoke, his voice cracked, betraying a fear he had never allowed to show before. Whispers grew louder in the corridors of Whitmore Global, the employees sensing a predator in the air. Sarah Mitchell said, "The staff feels abandoned." Jonathan Whitmore stormed through the hallway, his shoes striking marble with defiance, but eyes turned away. Thomas Green whispered, "They have lost their faith." The silence of the workforce screamed louder than any protest. Rumors moved like fire, each word a spark that scorched what little loyalty remained. On social feeds, headlines multiplied, dragging Jonathan's name through mud with every post. His empire once commanded awe, but now it quivered under suspicion, crumbling from the inside before the outside enemy even struck. In a dim corner of a private club, rumors thickened into shadows. A hushed conversation revealed the hand of an unseen power. Sarah Mitchell said, "Someone else is pulling strings." Jonathan Whitmore narrowed his eyes, anger disguised as composure. Thomas Green whispered, "The investors speak of a hidden figure." The name remained unspoken, a phantom stirring the downfall. The thought gnawed at Jonathan that the empire he built could be manipulated by forces outside his reach. The clink of glasses and murmurs of wealthy patrons faded as dread sharpened his focus. A shadow investor had entered the game, and the battlefield had shifted forever. Late that evening, a sudden breach erupted within Whitmore Global. Confidential reports leaked across the internet, each page a dagger in Jonathan's heart. Sarah Mitchell said, "This was an inside job." Her voice trembled with fury. Thomas Green whispered, "Our walls are collapsing." The betrayal was no longer an abstract fear but a clear wound inflicted from within. Faces of employees once trusted now seemed suspicious. Jonathan said, "Find them. Whoever they are, find them." His command was sharp, but the desperation underneath was undeniable. The Empire's secrets, once locked tight, had become weapons in enemy hands, and no defense seemed strong enough to contain the flood. At midnight, the silence of Jonathan Whitmore's office was pierced by a knock. An older figure entered, the mentor who once wore the crown. Richard Hale said, "This is how empires fall." His voice was grave, carrying scars of battles long lost. Jonathan Whitmore stiffened, pride clashing with the chill in Richard's word. Sarah Mitchell said, "We still have cards left." Thomas Green whispered, "But time is running out." The air thickened with history and warning. Richard Hale's eyes met Jonathan's with quiet sorrow, as if watching a cycle doomed to repeat. The city lights outside blinked like dying stars, and within the glass cage, Jonathan felt destiny press against him with crushing inevitability. The rival wasted no time exploiting weakness. In a sleek studio, Michael Donovan appeared on live television, his smile sharpened into a blade. Michael Donovan said, "Whitmore Global is rotting from the inside." His words struck like artillery, each syllable designed to cripple Jonathan Whitmore's already fragile hold. Sarah Mitchell clenched her jaw as she watched, fury building at the smug performance. Jonathan Whitmore whispered, "He smells blood." Thomas Green muttered, "Investors adore him now." The rival's voice became the anthem of doubt, echoing across headlines and feeds. Jonathan felt as though the empire he built was being auctioned away in real time. Each cheer for Michael Donovan another nail in his collapsing crown. Jonathan Whitmore attempted to gather his allies, summoning them to the boardroom with urgency. Sarah Mitchell said, "We must counter this narrative before it spreads further." Jonathan slammed his fist on the polished table, anger spilling over. Thomas Green whispered, "Half the directors won't stand with us anymore." His tone carried despair, but Jonathan's eyes burned with defiance. The once ironclad confidence of his team fractured before his eyes, loyalty thinning into silence. The walls of the boardroom, once a fortress, now seemed like a cage. Jonathan said, "If they abandon me, they abandon everything we built." His words echoed hollow, unconvincing even to himself. Behind closed doors, betrayal brewed in silence. Daniel Mercer, once Jonathan's trusted lieutenant, stood near him with reassuring words, but his eyes flickered elsewhere. Daniel Mercer said, "I will stand with you." Jonathan Whitmore nodded, exhausted relief brushing across his face. Sarah Mitchell studied Daniel Mercer with suspicion, her instincts screaming. Thomas Green muttered, "Trust is thin, but we need everyone we can keep." Unbeknownst to Jonathan, Daniel Mercer already whispered with Michael Donovan, his loyalty cracked by promises of power. The Empire's downfall was not just coming from outside forces, but from within the very heart of the Circle. On the lower floors, unrest grew louder. Emily Carter, a longtime employee, stood among colleagues, her voice sharp with disillusion. Emily Carter said, "This empire was built on lies, and now we pay the price." Her words stung as whispers of agreement spread. Jonathan Whitmore remained unaware of her defiance, though her anger began shaping the staff's collective voice. Sarah Mitchell said, "If the employees revolt, the entire structure collapses." Thomas Green muttered, "They no longer fear him." The Empire trembled as loyalty shifted from quiet obedience to open disdain, each word like a cracker spreading through glass. As dusk fell, the boardroom prepared for a critical vote. Directors whispered alliances in hushed tones, while Jonathan Whitmore stood alone at the head of the table. Sarah Mitchell said, "The numbers are slipping away." Her voice cut through the thick silence. Thomas Green whispered, "Some already pledged to Michael Donovan." Jonathan's jaw clenched as he stared at their faces, each one a coin flipping in the air. The Empire's survival rested not on truth, but on loyalty already fractured. Jonathan whispered, "This table once feared me. Now it judges me." The boardroom, once his throne, had turned into his battlefield. The betrayal finally revealed its teeth in a shadowed penthouse. Daniel Mercer met Michael Donovan, their handshake sealing Jonathan Whitmore's doom. Michael Donovan said, "He built an empire on arrogance. We'll bury him with it." Daniel Mercer replied, "I gave him loyalty, and he repaid it with disregard." Their words cut deeper than knives, echoing across the silent glass. Sarah Mitchell whispered to Jonathan Whitmore later, "Daniel Mercer is not with us anymore." Jonathan's face hardened, but inside, the earth crumbled. Thomas Green said, "If Mercer testifies, the board will follow." Jonathan whispered, "Then I'll drag him down with me." His voice was a low growl, torn between rage and desperation. The following morning, headlines screamed betrayal. Confidential emails between Daniel Mercer and Michael Donovan spread across every screen. Jonathan Whitmore slammed his fist against his desk, the glass rattling under his fury. Sarah Mitchell said, "It's out. Everyone knows." Thomas Green muttered, "The market will never forgive this." Jonathan's voice trembled. Mercer was family. His words carried the pain of broken trust, more devastating than the scandal itself. The Empire was not only losing billions but bleeding from betrayal's cut. The world did not care for truth. It cared for spectacle, and Mercer's treachery had given them the perfect show. That evening, Sarah Mitchell confronted Jonathan Whitmore in the boardroom. Sarah Mitchell said, "We still have a chance if we show unity." Jonathan stared into the reflections on the glass table, his voice dark. Jonathan Whitmore said, "Unity died the moment Mercer betrayed me." Thomas Green added, "The directors are shaken, but some still hesitate." The boardroom, once a place of authority, now felt haunted by betrayal. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the hum of the city outside. Jonathan's rage simmered beneath every word, but fear clawed at him from the shadows, threatening to consume what strength he had left. The confrontation finally came. Daniel Mercer entered Jonathan Whitmore's office with a smile sharpened by betrayal. Daniel Mercer said, "The board listens to me now." Jonathan Whitmore rose slowly, fury boiling beneath his calm surface. Jonathan said, "I gave you everything." Daniel Mercer replied coldly, "And I'll take what's left." Sarah Mitchell stood at Jonathan's side, her eyes locked on Daniel with venom. Thomas Green whispered, "This ends badly." The room felt like a battlefield, silent but electric. For the first time, Jonathan realized he was no longer feared. and that truth was deadlier than any scandal. After Daniel Mercer left, Jonathan Whitmore's voice broke through the silence. Jonathan whispered, "I'll destroy him before he destroys me." Sarah Mitchell said, "Desperation will consume you." Thomas Green muttered, "The board believes Mercer now." Jonathan leaned against the glass wall, his reflection fractured by the city's neon lights. He whispered again, almost to himself, "I built this kingdom, and no traitor will steal it." But as he spoke, the weight of inevitability pressed down. The empire was bleeding faster than he could stop it, and his vow felt less like defiance and more like the last gasp of a drowning man. In the chaos of the collapsing empire, a new voice emerged from the overlooked ranks. Olivia Brooks, a mid-level strategist ignored for years, spoke with quiet determination. Olivia Brooks said, "There's still a way to fight back." Jonathan Whitmore looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Sarah Mitchell raised an eyebrow, her curiosity battling with skepticism. Thomas Green muttered, "She doesn't know what she's stepping into." Yet Olivia's plan was sharp, practical, and bold, a spark in the ash of destruction. Jonathan Whitmore whispered, "You may be the only one left who isn't afraid." Her rise was unexpected, but it carried the weight of possibility, reshaping the battlefield. In a late-night strategy session, Olivia Brooks outlined her daring proposal. Olivia Brooks said, "We expose Michael Donovan's hidden dealings before he dismantles us." Jonathan Whitmore leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with renewed focus. Sarah Mitchell said, "It's risky, but it might buy us time." Thomas Green whispered, "The press will devour this." The office felt alive again, not with certainty, but with raw defiance. Jonathan Whitmore said, "Then we fight with whatever we have left." For the first time in weeks, the atmosphere shifted. Amid ruin, a glimmer of hope flickered, born not from the board, but from an underestimated voice. Tension thickened as Michael Donovan prepared his counterstrike. In his headquarters, screens flashed with damning stories against Whitmore Global. Michael Donovan said, "The empire's already mine." Meanwhile, Olivia Brooks pressed forward with data that could expose him. Sarah Mitchell whispered, "If this works, it changes everything." Jonathan Whitmore clenched his jaw, silent but resolved. Thomas Green muttered, "If it fails, it buries us faster." The clash of strategies felt like a chess game with no rules, every move laced with survival. Olivia Brooks' determination cut through the fog of fear, forcing even the most jaded to believe for a moment. The empire's halls shook with revelation as a corporate spy was caught. An employee's stolen files revealed years of sabotage. Sarah Mitchell said, "So, it was an inside enemy all along." Jonathan Whitmore glared, fury burning in his eyes. Olivia Brooks whispered, "This is the proof we needed," Thomas Green muttered. "But the damage is already done." The spy's face turned pale under the fluorescent lights, knowing exposure meant ruin. For Jonathan, the betrayal solidified his paranoia. But for Olivia, it became ammunition. The tide began to shift, but not without cost, as trust dissolved completely within the empire's walls. For the first time, Olivia Brooks held the room's attention. Olivia Brooks said, "This company is worth saving, but not through fear. We fight by showing their corruption." Jonathan Whitmore studied her, a flicker of reluctant respect crossing his face. Sarah Mitchell said, "She's right. The board will listen if we present this." Thomas Green whispered, "The underdog now carries the weight of an empire." Jonathan Whitmore whispered, "Then let her carry it." The rise of Olivia Brooks, once overlooked, now unsettled even Jonathan himself. Power shifted, not through the old guard's strength, but through a new force no one expected. The long-anticipated moment arrived as the hidden force revealed itself. Inside the grand boardroom, the shadow investor, Catherine Ward, stepped from the shadows with the confidence of a puppeteer. Catherine Ward said, "Everything until now has been my design." Jonathan Whitmore's fists tightened against the glass table, rage radiating from his silence. Sarah Mitchell whispered, "She owns more than half the votes," Thomas Green muttered. "The board is hers." Olivia Brooks stood firm, her gaze fixed on Catherine Ward with determination. Michael Donovan smirked, savoring the chaos. Jonathan Whitmore finally said, "You all may think this is over, but I am not finished." The air crackled with betrayal, greed, and finality, each face a mirror of ambition's cost. The alliance was forged before Jonathan Whitmore's eyes. Michael Donovan leaned toward Catherine Ward, their voices low but sharp. Michael Donovan said, "Together, we bury him forever." Catherine Ward replied, "He doesn't see the floor already gave way." Jonathan's glare could have set the room on fire, but Sarah Mitchell touched his arm, grounding him in silence. Olivia Brooks whispered, "We still have leverage." Thomas Green muttered, "Leverage only matters if they let us speak." Every whisper and sideways glance felt like a dagger. The empire was being stripped from Jonathan's hands piece by piece, not through battle, but through strategy written in Betrayal's ink. The vote neared, tension filling the air like storm clouds before a strike. Jonathan Whitmore stood tall, forcing strength into his voice. Jonathan Whitmore said, "This company was built from my blood, my years, my vision. You cannot erase me with ink." Catherine Ward replied coldly, "You are nothing but a relic clinging to ruins." Sarah Mitchell said, "Without Jonathan, there is no Whitmore Global." Olivia Brooks added, "Expose their corruption, and we shift the tide," Thomas Green muttered. "Half the table already moved against us." The directors shifted uneasily, their loyalty breaking like brittle glass. The battle's edge grew sharper with each passing second. The boardroom erupted in confrontation. Jonathan Whitmore slammed his palm against the table, glass trembling under the weight of his fury. Jonathan shouted, "You betray not just me, but the very foundation that made you rich." Catherine Ward smirked, her voice venomous. Catherine Ward said, "Foundations crack. It's time for new builders." Michael Donovan clapped slowly, taunting the room with mockery. Sarah Mitchell hissed, "This is theater, not governance." Olivia Brooks rose, her voice cutting through the chaos. Olivia Brooks said, "They profit from destruction, and every one of you knows it." The tension was unbearable, the room on the verge of imploding under its own greed and rage. The climax arrived like thunder striking glass. Catherine Ward raised her hand, and the directors followed. Catherine Ward said, "The board removes Jonathan Whitmore as CEO. Effective immediately." Silence swallowed the room as the words cut through Jonathan like steel. His face froze, eyes burning but lips silent. Sarah Mitchell whispered, "It's done." Thomas Green muttered, "We've lost." Olivia Brooks clenched her fists, her plan unfinished, her defiance still unbroken. Michael Donovan smirked triumphantly, the empire finally crumbling before his eyes. Jonathan whispered to himself, "They think this ends me." Yet his reflection in the boardroom glass showed not victory, but ruin carved across his face. The boardroom emptied, but Jonathan Whitmore remained frozen in his chair. Silence pressed against him like a physical weight. Sarah Mitchell whispered, "We fought as far as we could." Olivia Brooks stood near the window, her eyes burning with unfinished defiance. Thomas Green muttered, "History will remember him not for building, but for falling." Jonathan finally said, I gave everything, and they reduced it to nothing. His voice cracked but did not break. The city lights beyond the glass shimmered like a cruel reminder of ambition's cost. What had once been an empire now felt like ruins scattered at his feet. In the lobby below, reporters swarmed like vultures circling prey. Cameras flashed as Michael Donovan strode through the crowd with a victorious grin. Michael Donovan said, "The age of Whitmore Global is over." Catherine Ward followed, her steps calm, regal, and calculated. Catherine Ward said, "Empires don't fall, they're transferred." Their words cut through microphones and echoed across every screen. Above them, Olivia Brooks whispered, "They'll never understand the damage they've done." Sarah Mitchell replied, "They never do." Jonathan Whitmore stared down at the chaos, his reflection overlapping theirs in the glass. His hiss was empire already belonging to others. In the shadows of the parking garage, Jonathan Whitmore met the disillusioned mentor, Richard Hale. Richard Hale said, "I warned you, ambition has no mercy." Jonathan replied, "And still, I thought I could bend it to my will." Richard Hale shook his head slowly. Richard Hale said, "You built an empire on fire and wondered why it burned." Jonathan clenched his jaw, his voice heavy with regret. Jonathan said, "So, this is how they erase me." Richard Hale whispered, "Not erased, remembered as the lesson." The echo of their footsteps through the cold concrete became a requiem for a fallen king. Olivia Brooks sat alone in the dim office, scattered files glowing faintly on the screen. Olivia Brooks said, "We could have saved it if they had listened." Sarah Mitchell entered quietly, her face marked by exhaustion. Sarah Mitchell said, "You gave them something they feared most, truth." Olivia Brooks replied, "Truth won't stop them from burying it." For a moment, the weight of loss pressed heavier than the hope she once carried. Yet in her clenched fists, a quiet fire remained, hinting at unfinished battles. Beyond the window, the city pulsed, uncaring as the empire's ashes drifted into silence. Jonathan Whitmore walked alone through the midnight rain, the empire gone. The weight of his choices etched into every step. His voice broke softly as he whispered, "They think this ends me," but his reflection in the puddles revealed something darker. Defeat carried like a crown. In the distance, skyscrapers shimmered with power now in Michael Donovan's and Catherine Ward's grip. The streets were empty, silent but for the storm. Jonathan paused under a flickering streetlight, his shadow fractured on the pavement. For the empire he built, for the soul he lost, there was no applause, only silence.